Hello everybody and welcome. I'm the Rambling Director and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite Christmas specials of all time. It's one that a lot of you probably haven't even heard of because as far as I can tell it doesn't seem like this one ever became very popular. And yet when I was a kid I was all about this little special. It's simply called Olive the Other Reindeer. Now, I'm sure you've doubtlessly heard jokes your whole life about Olive the Other Reindeer from the line in Rudolph. Olive the Other Reindeer used to laugh and call him names. Well, it's based sort of on that little misunderstanding. One of the reindeer is injured, and Santa says on the radio that all of the other reindeer are going to have to pull them through. Well, Olive's pet flea, Fido, I love this movie, mishears it and convinces Olive that Santa is asking for your help, Olive, so you can't let him down. You gotta go out there and help Santa, Olive. The main creative force behind it was Matt Groening, the guy behind The Simpsons. And yeah, you can tell that from the sense of humor it has. Drew Barrymore talks Olive, and although I'm not a huge Drew Barrymore fan, I did really like her in this. In fact, I didn't know that she was in it until I watched it for this review. It just never stuck out to me that her name was in the credits, but there she is. She plays Olive the Other Reindeer, so who knew? Not me. We start off with a really cute little opening song number. That's right, this is a musical. And the songs are kind of goofy and kind of lame, but that is sort of the idea. You get the idea that this is making fun of Christmas specials as much as it is being a Christmas special in itself. I just realized that I'm getting a lot of like weird little bokeh lights shining all over my face because of the tree behind me. I'm not going to refilm this, so I guess you just have to live with a bunch of magic little sugar plum fairies all around the screen. Now the animation in this, I already mentioned, the animation style is kind of weird, but the animation itself is very cheap looking. Shockingly, though, that really works to its advantage because it has that sort of Rankin Bass sort of vibe. I know Rankin Bass didn't look anything like this, but you know how Rankin Bass cartoons often looked very cheap, or even Hanna-Barbera cartoons look very cheap. But that's part of the charm of them. And there is something charming about cheaply animated Christmas specials, like, for instance, the classic A Charlie Brown Christmas, which would not be as good if it was animated better. Now, right off the bat, you see how loving and caring and generous Olive is, because she helps a couple of mice find a tree that is the right size for their home, which is actually a pine air freshener for your car. That's a really cute little joke. She immediately meets a penguin named Martini. Yes, that was that magical time in cartoons when you could name a character after an alcoholic beverage and parents didn't get mad. Martini, the penguin, who you just have to wonder why on God's green earth that penguin is living here with other people, is selling stolen Rolexes in an alley. And they are Rolexes with 3 X's. Gosh, that is such a Simpsons joke. Now, although they do draw attention to it, they never make any dirty jokes about it. But then immediately afterwards, Martini explains that he got fired from his job as the zoo penguin because he was doing things, among them, smuggling in files so that the animals could escape their cages, and smuggling in dirty magazines. And Martini just calls them dirty magazines.
I'm a victim of oppressive corporate bureaucracy. Yeah, they fired me. I was a hard-working entrepreneur, smuggling in junk food, dirty magazines, files hidden inside cakes, until a stool pigeon, an actual stool pigeon, ratted me out.
I mean, you just could not do that today, could you? I mean, that's crazy that they got by with that. And yes, by the way, if I remember right, when I watched it as a kid, it was on Cartoon Network. How did they get by with that? Yeah, a lot of the jokes are dad jokes and that sort of thing, but gosh darn it, I just have the sort of sense of humor that I love that kind of ridiculousness. There's also a ton of fun signs in the background. The city they live in fact the world they live in, is just populated with such fun little end jokes, like a sign that says, "Rent a cake." How would you even... Don't want to ask. Don't want to know. I don't want to know. Now Olive goes home and her owner Tim is like, have you done your dog chores today? Like digging holes and barking at the mailman? And Olive's like, no, I haven't done any of those things, but you know, I try to be man's best friend by being your best friend, Tim. And he's like, get your act together, you're supposed to be a dog. One of the things he fusses at her for is not senselessly barking. Like, bro, you are so ungrateful. Now, it turns out he's not this mean all the time. He's actually normally a really nice guy, but he's really upset because Santa canceled his flight. He's not going to be able to make it this year because one of the reindeer damaged their hoof and damaged their leg, and they can't fly. As stated earlier, Olive has a pet flea named Fido who advises Olive that Santa is counting on her. So Olive is like, yeah, maybe you're right, I need to leave. But then Tim comes and apologizes through the window. It's like, oh, Olive, you know, I didn't mean all this stuff. But Olive can't hear him where she is. Don't question it. So Fido has to kind of play telephone between the two, and he ends up telling her that Tim doesn't like her anymore. She ruins Christmas, and Tim's going to replace her with a new dog.
We can still have Christmas. Come on in the house. I'm lighting the Yule log, and there's a space for you.
You can't kill my Christmas. Get out of this house. I'm getting a new dog, and I'm replacing you.
Tim's getting a new dog. He's replacing me.
Now, at this point, I have to wonder if Fido is actually somewhat deaf, or if he's just being malicious to get Olive to go and save Christmas. And in this universe, I'd kind of believe either one. There are some great little jokes also as she's tuning through the radio, and this is my favorite.
Check out the Marzipan Shack's pre-Ramadan clearance sale.
I do like that they added in that little moment with Tim, by the way, because when we first meet him, he's fussing at Olive. It'd be really easy to just not like him and think he's a cruel, nasty guy. But no, he's a genuinely good guy, and he realizes that he snapped, and so our second ever interaction with him is apologizing and owning that he should have behaved better, which does kind of, in my eyes anyway, redeem his character and make me actually want to see him more, especially because he's very tore up when Olive runs away to help Santa and thinks that Olive actually just ran away because of the way he treated her. And so by the end, you do feel happy they're back together, and it doesn't seem like she's going back to an abusive situation or anything like that. As she leaves, she accidentally knocks down the mailman, and he's really happy. He's like, no, don't worry about it. And Olive is like, what, you're not gonna kick me? Gosh, this world is so mean. It's like how in a Charlie Brown Christmas, everybody just hates Charlie Brown for no discernible reason. You get the vibe that everybody just hates this poor puppy for no discernible reason. Now, what's cool about all this is that Olive is kind of setting up to be a Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer sort of character. So they want to make her the underdog. Thank you. And then you'll be more proud and more happy when she gets to the end and does what everybody's been telling her she can't do. Now, the angry mailman sings his own song, which is one of the best Scrooge sort of songs I've ever heard, and it's called Baa, Bug, and Hum. That is so awesome. And actually his reasoning for hating Christmas is pretty legit. It's all about how, like, Christmas is a hard time for mailmen, okay? And yet, strangely, by the end, he kind of ends up suffering for being right to have that opinion. I don't think anybody should hate any holiday, you know, just because of something like that. But it's a valid reason to dislike when the holiday comes around if it's an especially hard time for you.
The shoulder strap tears at my flesh. I'm a zombie by Thanksgiving. With 4 weeks torture still to come, this is no way to make a living. Christmas, Baa, Bug, and Hum.
I love that instead of Greyhound, the bus station is called Mauve Hound. And when Olive goes up to buy a ticket, the person who's selling the ticket says, chasing or riding? That's so funny. And again, it's like, there's tons of jokes like that that have almost this Groucho Marx sort of a vibe to them, where they're so fast, you kind of could miss them on the first go-around. So Olive and Martini try to catch a bus. Just then the mailman comes in, tries to kidnap Olive to keep her from going to the North Pole to help Santa. and says he's arresting her for mail fraud. But Martini saves the day, and together they leave out on the bus, where they meet a bus driver. Gosh, I love this. His name is Richard Stans. And as Olive explains the situation, he's like, "Oh, you just misunderstood, Olive. Don't you know, I thought that the Pledge of Allegiance was about me for years." Richard Stans. I had to pause it and take a moment to reflect before I caught what that joke was saying. That is hilarious. And to the Republic for Richard Stans. That is so funny, and it begins this running joke throughout the rest of the movie where people keep popping up with names that are based on misunderstanding of lyrics. There's also so many little just off-the-cuff jokes that never even come back. They're just there as kind of like little gags, and then they're gone. Like the Eskimos who vacationed to the town where Olive has been living, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you know, we came to enjoy the nice warm 40-degree weather, but you know, it's time to get back to the 0-degree weather for us. It's just too hot here." Again, it's sort of like the Dudley Do-Right movie. It's one of those things where not every joke lands, but at the same time, it's so charming that it's trying so hard with every line just to give you a million jokes, and if they don't all work, oh, who cares, because in 2 seconds there'll be another one. I love stuff like that. I love to see something that is trying so hard to make you laugh that it just doesn't care if it comes across as lame or goofy, as long as it affects somebody. There's lots of little throwaway jokes that I don't even have time to mention, like a tinsel truck that tips over, and when it spills, all the tinsel just busts out of the truck and decorates a bunch of pine trees. And little jokes like when we come in the middle of one of Martini's stories, and Martini's like, "Yeah, and then I told the judge, well, technically it's not a pyramid scheme," and then he gets cut off and we never hear the rest of that story. I needed to hear the rest of that story. They stop at a diner, and the mailman once again is there to try to kidnap her. Now, when the mailman has her in the back of his truck and he's driving away, Olive starts looking through the packages, and very casually the postman's like, "Hey, it's illegal to mess with the mail," and Olive's like, "Well, what if this one's addressed to me?" And he's like, "Oh, okay." You're kidnapping her. You can't just be that easygoing about it. But by lucky happenstance, the box is addressed to Olive from Deus Ex Machina. There are some jokes in this that kids are not even going to understand, which is why I'm covering it, really, because I loved this special as a kid. I thought it was very cute and funny as a kid. But as an adult, I get way more of the jokes now, and I actually think it might be one of the funniest Christmas specials I've ever seen. The animation does not hold up as well as I remembered. However, the writing holds up way better. It is an infinitely funnier, better overall product than I ever remembered it being. This thing is funny. Now, I mean, granted, I'm sure there are people who don't have a dad joke sort of sense of humor like me. Maybe you won't find it as funny, but I thought this whole thing is just so funny, especially when Olive then opens it to find a nail file, files her way out of the mail truck, and when she gets back, Martini's like, "How did you get back?" And she's like, "Do you know who Deus Ex Machina is?" And he's like, "No, who's that?" And she's like, just look it up." Anyway, that is really funny and really clever. Well, Richard Stans has to get his bus back to the depot, so he ends up dropping them off at an elf, reindeer, and biker bar. I love when a movie is written in a way that I get to say awesome sentences like that in the review. You gotta look out for those little background jokes, because there's a sign at the bar that says, "Icicles must be surrendered at door." Once they're in the bar, all of these elves and reindeer start acting really, really nasty toward them. Like saying, "Oh, you're a reindeer, huh? Let's see you fly." And they're throwing her back and forth. And one of them is just like, "Hey, let's take her up to the roof and throw her off and see if she can fly." Gosh, I know I keep saying it, but the world of this film is so mean. But that kind of makes it all the funnier. It's kind of a dark comedy, but for kids, so it never gets too dark, or, well, for families, so it never gets too dark, but at the same time, some of these jokes are surprisingly dark. Like, they'll take you off guard a little bit. Also, I love that the main reindeer we deal with while we're in this bar is named Schnitzel. And after they're just so mean to her and Martini, Olive gives this great little speech.
Maybe I'm just a little runt with no antlers, but it looks like I'm the only one who's trying to save Christmas. There are actually people out there who want to cancel Christmas. Are you on their side? You must have asked Santa for something. Do you think you deserve what you've asked for? I'm trying to deserve the good things I have, and the good things I hope I will have in the future.
One for the ages, Olive. You tell them. The reindeer even have a little song that they sing in the bar about how they're not so bad, which is probably the least good song in the movie, but it's still pretty cute and it has a lot of little fun in-jokes. That's when Schnitzel introduces us to a man named Round John Burgeon, and Olive is like, oh yeah, like from the Silent Night song, and the guy's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Again, it's just a running joke throughout the whole movie, all these people with misheard song lyric names. And gosh, if it is not just really original.
He can take you up in his half-track. Olive, Round John Virgin.
Oh, like in the Silent Night song.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So Round John decides to, gosh, that's an odd thing to say. Round John decides to give them a lift in his snowcat, which is called Polar Express. And this was 1999, so it was made before the movie. So yes, this was a reference to the children's book, which, although a classic, means less people would have probably gotten that joke in 99 than would get it now. When we get to the North Pole, it's quite a cute little design. What I think is funny is that on top of the roof is a Hanukkah menorah, which is kind of fun. I like to think that Santa and Herschel the Hanukkah Goblin kind of share residencies, like maybe they split the rent. Security will not let Olive in, no matter how she tries to explain to this elf. So Martini has to create a distraction where he gifts a fake Rolex to this elf, but if it doesn't work, he has to call this service number, and then he pretends to fix the guy's watch and is like, can you turn off the electric field around the fence? It's kind of messing with what I'm doing. And that allows Olive to go in because this elf is just so bad at his job, he kills the security at the North Pole to get his fake stolen Rolex fixed. Sure.
All right. It just needs a complimentary engraving. E-L-F, right?
At the same time, the mailman shows up with more letters for Santa and they allow him in, at which point he steals the bag of gifts from the sleigh. So Santa does agree to let Olive give it a try and see if she can help fly the sleigh. And the whole time, the entire scene, you see Blitzen's broken leg hanging out of the stall. That is just so funny. Like, there's hardly an angle in the whole scene that you don't see this broken hoof just hanging out the stall door. If I may take this special way too seriously for just a moment, Olive does influence the world around her and make the world a better place, but it's not because of some Christmas miracle that makes her fly. It's because of her positivity. Comet initially says we shouldn't even try to pull the sleigh with only 7 reindeer because we probably can't. But Olive's positivity convinces them to say, not only are we going to try it, we're going to add the extra weight of a random beagle just hanging off of us. By the end, her reckless positivity and belief that she can do something that everybody's telling her she can't doesn't just end up having an effect on her. She actually spreads that level of optimism to other people who had completely lost all hope. So if you want to take a really serious message out of this Christmas special, you can, because it surprisingly works very well. There's also a really funny moment where Olive's like, why didn't you guys just replace Blitzen with Rudolph? And Comet's like, oh, please kid, Rudolph's a myth. Now, the mailman, of course, has stolen all the presents and he kidnaps Martini. Olive picks up the mailman's scent as soon as they figure out that this has happened and that they're stuck with a bag full of mail, and they track down the mailman, land on top of the truck, and Martini ends up using a jack-in-the-box to scare him to the point that he passes out, and then they're able to get the gifts back. Now, I haven't mentioned it till this point, but the mailman is played by Dan Castellaneta, hope I pronounced that right, who is the voice of Homer Simpson. Now, I didn't realize that at first because I think he's kind of trying to do like a Vincent Price impersonation, which is not very good, but I have heard from multiple voice actors that some of the best and most memorable voices do come from a voice actor trying to do an imitation and failing, so I thought that was a great little Easter egg, though, because not only is Matt Groening the producer of this, he cast Homer Simpson as the main villain, and if you look closely, a lot of the letters he's delivering are addressed to Bart Simpson. Well, Olive checks and makes sure Martini's okay while Santa gets his bag, and Martini gives this great line, which I'm ashamed I didn't see coming. I genuinely did not think about the fact that they would make a joke like this, but it's so obvious once you hear it that it's the whole reason they named him Martini.
Are you okay, Martini?
Shaken, but not stirred.
It really shocks me how many times while rewatching this, I just cracked up. Like, there were jokes I just didn't see coming. And sometimes it's not about how obvious or not obvious a joke was. Sometimes it's just about whether or not you can deliver it in a way that actually does still take the audience off guard. Olive gets some of the cardboard boxes from the mail truck and creates little wings so she can flap along with the reindeer, which is really cool. Martini decides that since he can't ride back with Santa's sleigh, he's just going to drive the mail truck home. So they tie up, bound, and gag the mailman, put him in the back of the truck, and hold him against his will. Wait a second. I think we missed like 8 steps in the things that we could have done to handle the situation. The jokes as they fly around the world is great. Like, for instance, there's a Rolex logo on the Parliament Tower where Big Ben is. The Pope also gets a baseball cap and changes out his mitre for it. And I guess Martini becomes a mailman because he sees dollar signs.
It's not as glamorous as helping Santa, but there'll be trouble if the folks can't enter their sweepstakes. Besides, Christmas gratuities.
Now, he comes back to the zoo, and the guy over the zoo is like, wow, you know, you saved the day, you're really marketable, why don't you come back and be our star penguin again? We want to give you your old job back. And Martini's like, no, I'm going to stay a mailman, this is kind of cool, but I have a replacement penguin for you. Which means he's going to stay in a penguin cage in the zoo for the rest of his life. Again, I think we missed about 25,000 steps before we got to this point, people. Gosh, what a dark little thing to end his character with. I mean, I know he was the villain, he tried to ruin Christmas. I don't know. It's dark comedy. Maybe I should just relax and enjoy it for what it is, but whenever I see something like that happen, especially in a kid's show, I think, man, that is really dark. So we'll just assume that at some point he escaped the zoo like the monkeys did, and eventually gets out and plots a revenge plan. Now that would be a fun sequel. Now, a little neat kind of end joke at the end is that it becomes very foggy, and they have to rely on Olive to use her nose to guide them on their way back to the North Pole. Which is kind of, again, making her like, in this universe, the real-life Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Except Olive is using her nose, whereas Rudolph is using his... Wait a second. Yet again, with this kind of quirky sense of humor, they land in the North Pole, and Comet looks at Olive and just goes, Olive, I'd be honored if you called me Comet the Other Dog. That is just... Again, it's just like, some of the jokes, they're not necessarily funny as jokes, but they're just so odd that they still make me laugh. So Olive gets back home, and the reindeer are sad to see her go. Tim apologizes and even says that Olive is the best dog ever. Not because she saved Christmas, by the way. They make it really clear that he's saying that and he's apologetic because he thought she actually just ran away. He doesn't even find out that she saved Christmas until right before this happens, and he was already regretful. Again, that's a nice little moment of redemption for his character, so we don't hate him. And he kind of has a new appreciation for Olive, and he sees, man, I didn't realize that you being different from any other dog actually ended up being an asset, being a benefit, and I should have trusted in the fact that you were different and been okay with it rather than trying to make you fit a mold you don't fit into, which is a nice lesson for both kids and adults. They reprise the first song that opened the movie, and we see all of our friends getting their gifts, including Round John Burgeon getting his drill. I love that little moment. And Martini is delivering mail to Olive, and we see that they stay friends, long after the movie's over. And you know what? It's a cute ending. And I think that just about sums up the movie. It's cute. It's not a great work of genius like The Christmas Carol. It's not an awesome spectacle like The Polar Express. But it's cute, and it's cozy. It makes you feel all those warm fuzzies that you associate with Christmas time. And it does it in a way that's really humorous, really charming. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It gets in, does its job, and gives you a few laughs, and even has kind of an uplifting message at the end, which, although they don't take it overly seriously, if you wanted to take it seriously, it's actually a pretty darn good message. Olive the Other Reindeer is on YouTube. You can just go watch it for free. So I have to highly recommend you go check out one of Matt Groening's most underrated little projects, and possibly one of the most underrated little cartoon Christmas specials from the late 90s. So thank you everybody for watching, God bless you, and I will see you in the next one.